from Grameen Foundation. Please get a copy. Inside, you will see a QR code. And so by you scanning that code, you can be able to do that survey that won't take you very long.
Welcome to the session on bridging the gender digital gap. This is an invitation for you to actually be an active influencer in how we are going to build the toolkit to scale up digital advisory services globally. So this is something that whether you're in the space of ag tech, you are an implementer, you are an international NGO like us, you work with farmers, you are a farmer, you have extension services, it actually covers everyone who could be potential users of digital agriculture services. So we are very cognizant that this is a very difficult time for everyone, having the presidential summit, the presidential event going on. But thank you for choosing to be with us on this busy day and near the end of the day for that matter. We are sincerely appreciative of your presence. So my name is Gigi Gatti, and I am joined by my colleagues, Brigita Mugo and Alfred Yeboah. We are from the Grameen Foundation USA, and we are an international profit organization based in Washington, D.C. My colleagues here are based in Kenya, in Nairobi, and in Accra, Ghana, respectively. Grameen puts women at the center of our work. It's always at the center of our work. So gender is always a focus without excluding men, okay? Male intervention is also very important in our work. And we believe that given the opportunities and the enabling environment, women will be able to attain their full power. So Grameen Foundation has been a pioneer in using digital advisory services in agriculture extensions. In fact, over the years, we have developed our own systems as well and implemented systems that were developed by our partners, such as BusyTech. Unfortunately, despite the investments globally that has been put in developing digital agriculture services, there is a pressing issue. Millions of farmers around the world, especially women, are still not able to access digital ag extension applications worldwide. And we are not seeing the digital divide, on this going down, and that is the frustration. So we are currently implementing a research action project called AgriPath over 5 years with a consortium that includes us, Grameen Foundation, the Center for Development and Environment at the University of Bern, the University of Lausanne, the International Center of Insect Physiology and Ecology, Farm Better, and the Grameen Foundation India. So it is a pretty big consortium that is working towards the AgriPath project. And our goal is to evaluate the effectiveness of digital, in-person, and hybrid extension services. How does this look like, across 5 countries? The initial 5 countries are Uganda, Tanzania, India, Burkina Faso, and Nepal, with the ultimate outcome of strengthening country-specific knowledge on gender and youth involvement among smallholder farmers, so that these women and youth can actually navigate the unpredictability of farming due to climate change. We are leading the development of a public good. So everyone will have access to what we are developing. And it is going to be a toolkit for every digital agriculture system stakeholder, which will combine all the learning strategies and tools that we are gathering over a period of 5 years, plus our own experiences as individual organizations. We are cognizant that there are several toolkits that have been developed for digital tools globally, and those are also going to be taken into consideration. However, the stubborn issue of gender inclusion and closing the digital divide still prevails. And it is our intention that with this action research, our interaction with you, and open discussions, we can get to the weeds of that. What could make digital ag extension application used, enjoyed, and trusted by women? At this point, I would like to pass the mic to my colleague Brigita, who is actually leading, the development of the toolkit. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. So I'm just going to touch a little bit on the toolkit and just give you an introduction on what the toolkit is and what we intend to achieve with it. So it is, as Gigi has mentioned, we are conducting research through the AgriPath project. And so the toolkit is really an evidence-based resource that is aimed at increasing capacity within digital advisory services stakeholders to really lead them towards evaluating and assessing their perspectives towards delivering digital advisory services. And the main audience for the AgriPath toolkit is digital advisory service implementers, be they in the private sector, in the development sector, as well as extension programs. And because we have such a big focus on gender within the toolkit, it becomes even more relevant for digital advisory service implementers who are keen to ensure that they get their solutions in the hands of more and more women. So the objectives of the toolkit are twofold. Number one is to accelerate the uptake of the findings from our research. So with the work that we are going to conduct in the countries that Gigi has mentioned, Uganda, Tanzania, Burkina Faso, India, and Nepal, how can we package all the insights and the learnings that are going to come into that into something that can really accelerate uptake of the findings that we uncover? And the second objective of the AgriPath toolkit is really to develop capacity among the digital advisory service providers. So we're going to be undertaking a lot of research complemented by behavioral studies as well as human-centered design processes. And it's going to result in a pool of a lot of evidence that is gathered from across the 5 implementing countries. And the idea is to use that, put that into a toolkit that we can then disseminate among other digital advisory service providers so they can learn from our experience and use the insights from AgriPath to improve their own digital advisory services. So we are going to be covering several aspects within this toolkit, and we want to look at the end-to-end process of solution delivery, so from the research phase to the projects, to the product or solution development, implementation, and then of course, sustainability as well as scaling. Our approach to the creation of this toolkit is really very consultative, and that is one of the reasons why we are having this session here today. So that in as much as we are going to borrow a lot from the learnings through the research that we are conducting, and as Gigi mentioned, we are also going to be leveraging resources and input from others who've done this work before us. There's also the very important aspect of getting feedback and input and the contribution of other digital advisory service providers, so that as we are co-creating this toolkit, it's really led and guided by actual needs on the ground. And we will be engaging over and beyond this session. We will be engaging with players in this space to understand what gaps still exist from an information perspective, what are they still struggling with, and how that can be included in the toolkit to make it more usable and more valuable to the DAS community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brigita and Gigi. So just to set the context, that we are looking at developing this toolkit that can be applied globally. So as Gigi indicated, this is more of a public good, and the effort towards designing and also looking at the content of this toolkit has started, and this is just one of the engagements that we are looking at. But there will be other design workshops, other learning events that we would engage basically with stakeholders within the digital agriculture space, so that we can also get feedback in terms of what is priority when it comes to designing and looking at content for a toolkit that is designed to basically address the problem of the gender digital divide. So basically, that is the question that we are attempting to answer through the design and development of this toolkit. And the way we envision this is threefold. We are looking at three main sections of the toolkit. The first one has to do with the research and the human-centered design approach. Here we are looking at what kind of questions should we pose? What should be the correct research protocol? How do we translate research findings into actionable, recommendations? So that is the first aspect of the tool. The second one will look at sustainability and scaling, because for a toolkit that we are looking at that should be applicable globally, it needs to be sustainable. We should be able to scale it. So here we'll be looking at what kind of partnerships do we bring together, what kind of business model makes sense, and how robust must the digital agriculture advisory tool be in order for it to be sustainable and scalable. And then the third and final section has to do with the gender aspects. So here we are basically looking at key design and content considerations when it comes to addressing some key barriers that we have identified that prevent women from sustainably using digital agriculture or digital advisory solutions. One, this includes social and cultural limitations. And as you bear with me, because of some of these traditional harmful gender norms and social norms, women just do not have the beyond access to digital advisory services to sustainably use them for their benefit. Sometimes they even need permission, from their spouses or husbands to use this tool. And then the second factor or barrier we identified has to do with time constraints. And this relates to mobility issues. Sometimes even making that trip for a training in order to also be inclusive in that digital space becomes a challenge. Affordability has come up. Some of our handsets, cost of data, airtime, in order to really get these women to use the tools for their benefit, to increase their productivity, income, is also a key barrier. And literacy issues, digital illiteracy. Because once you are not digitally literate, it clearly presents a barrier to the extent to which you can use some of these digital tools. Obviously, it comes with data harvesting. And sometimes how safe is even this data. So these are some of the barriers that we have come up with. But I would want to share with you quickly some of the top key considerations when it comes to both the design and the content of this toolkit that we are looking to deploy with service providers when it comes to the deployment of digital advisory services. One, we are looking at a blended approach. So what is the right mix of technology? What kind of language should we use? Should it be local language such that it's more adaptable and relatable to women farmers or agribusinesses? The kind of imagery that we use in terms of the build of the tool itself, the interface, are they user-friendly images? Sometimes when we are describing an agricultural problem, you see the image of a woman placed there. But when it comes to the solution, then you see it's a male. Can we have the picture of a woman reflected in both the challenge and the remedy or the mitigating strategy, for instance? So we are looking at what will be the right mix of technology to really get or drive uptake and adoption by women for this digital advisory service. The second key consideration that we are looking at has to do with the delivery channels. How gender sensitive are these delivery channels? And for the initiative, we are looking at three main delivery channels and basically asking ourselves what is most effective. So is it the self-service model where a woman has a handset and is able to lead the learning process herself? Or is it an agent intermediated service where you have an extension agent with a tool who actually dialogues with the farmer to make sure that he's pushing for adoption of good agricultural practices? Or is it actually a hybrid model where you have an aspect of the digital advisory solution where women can directly access? Should aspect also be facilitated through, let's say, a setup of a call center or a national helpline or a digital innovation hub where a woman can call in and speak to a woman support agent? Sometimes the women want to speak to a woman who is actually providing support services as part of a call center or a digital innovation hub, which is set up. So these are some of the channels that we are trying to understand and to look at which of these are most effective at actually getting women to adopt, going beyond just access. You can access, but when it comes to sustained use, that could present a challenge. And then finally, I would also want to mention that should it be a tool that provides site-specific farm management best practices to a farmer who is able to actually provide a specific problem that she has identified on a farm? So should it be a site-specific, farm management decision support tool, which is being provided to help this farmer? Or should we even build linkages with other services such that the digital advisory solution is holistic in the way it works? Should we link it to mobile financial services, climate smart agriculture content? These are all up, but we are trying to engage to understand in terms of priority when it comes to key content and design considerations that we should be paying attention to when we are developing a tool, a digital advisory service tool that can be applicable globally. So as Gigi indicated, this is a public good, and we need your voices and experience reflected in this. So we will now pass the microphone and actual work to you. Again, as I indicated, we've already started a process of engaging stakeholders within the digital advisory space. They are providing feedback. They are helping us prioritize in terms of what we include in this toolkit. But this session is just one opportunity that will help us get feedback from you. So I'll turn it over to Gigi in terms of how we get that feedback from you.
Thank you, Alfred. I just want to have a sanity check. How many of you are not able to access the QR code for the survey? If you are not able to, I have a hard copy with me because I always come with a backup.
Yes. So the QR code is at the corner.
Yeah.
And then once you open it, you skip the ad, and then you'll see the question.
Yeah, please skip the ad.
Janet.
Yes. We had no control over the ad for this one. But your inputs are valuable, and if you'd like to be more involved in and updated, in the development of the toolkit, please opt in so we can send you the invite for a longer webinar actually that we are planning for this particular topic and other topics as well as we go along. It is a 5-year engagement. It is a 5-year project. So it's pretty long, and we'd like you to be part of our email lists. Okay, so just let me know if you cannot access it electronically, and I'm happy to give you a paper survey. But at this point, as Alfred was saying, and as Brigitta was saying, we'd like it to be as interactive as possible. So let me shoot in the first question, okay? And please, you can share your experiences in developing tools, implementing tools. What are the barriers that you are seeing with women adopting the tools, the digital extension services? What are their issues in understanding content? Those are very critical, in this discussion. So let me first shoot the first question. How many of you think that user interface design is important to consider when designing systems that could be used as digital agriculture services? So for instance, an example would be if you wanted to know what is wrong with your rabbit or your livestock, maybe not rabbit is not a good example, okay, your goat, okay. So and you want to take a photo of that, the sick goat, and you're expecting the app to give you some kind of results, what is wrong with the goat or what is wrong with your coffee, coffee crop, by putting in a picture of the leaves. How many of you think that the user interface design is important for women to use? Very important, according to Sir. Yeah. So you're very right, sir. It's very, very important.
Very, 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 very important. Yeah, really, this is a great program, and it can increase skills to our smallholder farmers we work with in our organizations. Maybe really, as we have now your contact, it will help us. We have now to empower them, and even if it will be possible, you can also have time to come to civil society organizations, as well as we are working with the smallholders farmers in our locations. Yeah, it will be spread widely, and it can bring positive impact in the community.
Thank you very much, sir. User interface is actually one of the first things that you should be looking at when designing systems. In our case, as Brigita was mentioning a while ago, we have already done a series of human-centric design activities in those 5 countries. And we are seeing differences in those countries. So again, there is no one rule. And why is that? Because there are cultural, there are social norms, there are also digital literacy and language issues that you also have to consider. Now, as a trivia, okay, if you want to capture and make your system palatable or enjoyable, because would you use an app that's not enjoyable? You will not, right? That's kind of boring. Even if it's an ag extension system, you would like it to be fun, right? To be usable. So how many of you think that color is important when designing an agriculture extension app that you want women to use? How many of you think that color is important? No one? So I can just sit here, design my system, and use any color I want, and that's fine. Okay? Wrong. Okay? In our studies, okay, color is very important. Okay? It actually makes women feel more comfortable to use the app. It's kind of strange. I'm not a psychologist. I cannot, explain the link between color, trust, fun. I like this app. Okay? And maybe you can look back. Why do you have themes in your computers, right? Why do you have background? Why do you choose the certain background? Why do you choose a certain color scheme? All of that boil, into something. Now, we thought that we're designing for women. Let's use pink, or at least the color pink. When we did our human-centered design, which means we actually asked the farmer women to use it, to test it for us, they hated it. They didn't like pink, at least for this particular country. So there are certain assumptions that we can do as tech developers that do not translate into what we call usability. And that's very important to come out in the toolkit. How do we make it usable, enjoyable, trust? Trust is an issue too for women. For instance, is it an app that asking too many questions about themselves? Then they kind of like this app, it's asking everything about me. So ask the minimal things that you can have to make certain decisions about their farms, about the weather, about what crops are they tending to, what are the issues. And the proxy app that we are using here is an app called Farm Better. It doesn't mean that is the system that we will be, kind of like branding and marketing. No, we are using it as a proxy for any system for that matter. And so the toolkit, we are using it to test, but we are not necessarily using that, to be able to sell Farm Better. No, that's not the case here. So it is a proxy that is being used to get information, to test it, that will translate into the toolkit. Yeah.
Gigi, and as I recall, I remember we engaged some women farmers, right? And some of them were actually asking that some of the content be gamified, put in some kind of a game. So they are playing a game, but still engaging with content of best practices they can actually apply to their farms. So I just wanted to get your reaction. Do you think that this is something, or we basically are looking for suggestions in terms of how user-friendly, in terms of content.
I will take in the question.
Yeah.
Anyone has a question to our program?
Apologies, I'm late. It might have been taken care of. How far have you gone in terms of localizing your digital innovation? You're in Africa, and I'm from Tanzania, right? Smallholder farmers will be very interested to have whatever you're having in there. Let us be creative. Can we look for somebody who understands their language? If I'm coming from a certain region, and I find an app that speaks my language as a farmer, I guess I get more connected. So it's just an advice. Please consider that. Not only you can also pick, if you come to Tanzania, for instance, using a very simple Swahili that is not a complicated Swahili might be something bonus because everyone can understand. And the other one, I think what I'm just seeing here is that there are smallholder farmers that cannot access smartphone. Like how interesting are you going to make it? Somebody who's using these very normal phones. What kind of games are we going to play in that particular app? So I think a lot needs to be done, but we need to make it very funny, and we can also make it like just need to be more creative. But we should also consider the language part, because our farmers feel connected when people speak their own kind. So that they should not see this as a foreign item that is coming to us. They need to be connected. And how best can we do it? Let us make also language as a priority as we go forward. About the game, I think I love the game, and I would love to see in that particular app. And I congratulate you guys for the great initiative. Yeah, all the best.
Yeah. And thank you so much for your contribution. I think in terms of language, that has been taken care of, right?
Yes, the language aspect has been taken care of. The beauty with the approach we've taken is we are being iterative throughout the process. So we may have started at this point, but as we engage more farmers, as we go into the farms and understand what their specific needs are, we are adapting the app as we move along. we did do a first round of translation for Tanzania, and when we took it out into the field as part of our testing process, the language was not natural because it was translated using, AI and all these other things. So we now had to go to a second level to make the language natural and more relatable to the farmers. So thank you for that feedback, and it's something that we are very keen on ensuring that we get right.
I think we have a question.
Yes. So we've heard a lot about the toolkit you have mentioned. You've talked about colors. You've talked about the importance of the themes and the look of these things. These are really important. But I think what's more important is the content. So when we talk about the content, I think this has been said in another session. Some person said. The biggest tragedy of extension services is misinformation, because they are reaching the farmers. They are reaching some faraway farmers, last mile players that governments cannot reach, and sometimes the issue is the content. So how do you make sure that the content that's being delivered is actually relevant and promoting sustainable practices?
Should I take a first crack? Okay. I wanted to first address the question on usability. That's okay. On the gaming front, so we are very cognizant that a lot of women and even, farmers in general don't have a lot of data connection. They're not connected. And also their phones are simpler, right? So one of the things that was a finding in this research that is ongoing is the use of social media. That is the reason why there is a question in the survey about how do you perceive ag extension? Do you think social media will play a part? And in Tanzania, we are experimenting with a WhatsApp application, wherein you are actually basically using WhatsApp, which is a lighter form, and then you get answers to your questions, you get connected to an extension officer, and so forth and so on. So that actually, we had a training of trainers yesterday. Was that yesterday? Yesterday, yes. And so we were quite excited to see, because as we learn, we iterate and then we test again. And that brings us to the question of content, right? In this case, our proxy or our test subject, FarmBetter, is actually extracting its content from the WOCUT database. So that is very scientific. That is proven. The recommendations are proven. However, okay, even myself cannot understand it, It is very technical in nature. So that is one of the findings that we have, is that no matter how scientific or technical the approach it, you have to simplify it in a layman's language. And this is something that we have done in systems that are owned by Grameen in the past. So definitely that is a point of improvement. And how do we know if it's working? Farmers should actually test it themselves, to see if they understand the content. And Alfred, did you want to speak a little bit more about the content?
No, and to say that, in fact, with the right mix of innovations, it includes radio and other mass media channels. So most of the time when we hear digital advisory service, we limit ourselves to just the tablets and the gadgets. But these are ways by which we are also able to reach the last mile especially. And then in terms of content, again, we would only work with organizations that are doing this, and not to start all over again. Organizations that have been verified and validated, like Infonet, for instance. These are recognized organizations that do what they do best. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, so we'll continue. A clap for them. Yes, so we'll continue this discussion, even though they will not be on stage, but we can have one-on-one. I feel like these are conversations for one-on-one, so we can continue as we socialize. And we're going to have our next session with CGIAR at 5. So we have around 20 minutes of breathing, talking to each other, socializing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yeah. And as a reminder, please share the survey with anyone you know who would be interested. We will keep on, improving and sharing out. So if you want to get in touch, please do fill in the survey. Thank you very much.
Our next session, the question is, what do roots and tubers and tuber crops contribute to agri-food system transformation? So I'm looking forward to hearing from that. I'm a friend of CGIAR. They are a well-established organization, and I think they will be here discussing in the next segment and tomorrow morning as well. So looking forward to that. I'm gonna go around just asking about app and user. There is a human aspect that we always forget. How many apps are in your phone? How many do you use in a day? Do you even use 10% of the apps on your phone? Maybe I can hear from our lady in blue today.
I normally use those which are active, that I can interface with them. I use WhatsApp, Instagram, mostly emails and tweet. Yeah, those are every day. Depends with the content. If I cannot get it on these other platforms, means I will use it. It's a daily duty that I'll be working on, so I'll always go to it if I get the contents that are reliable with my work.
Thank you so much. I'm coming here to my fellow Kenyan, bright smiles and big foreheads, but we love them. What has been your experience with utilization of softwares and apps?
Thank you. I think that, of course, I have been utilizing them, but there's a correlation with age. So as I'm growing older, I'm struggling. And I have to rely on my children to help me with most of them or to tell me about the new ones. So I think we need to embrace the younger generation and what they are into and what they can teach us along the way. However, I like the point they make about their attractiveness or what makes me interested in an app. And whether you agree with it or not, but the issue of color and the acoustics and how it looks, it's a factor in itself before you can go into the content. So for me, like the Twitter, they've just rebranded. Not that they've asked for my feedback, but the color black, I have struggled a lot during this week to connect with it. You know what I mean? So I really like about the toolkit and some of the aspects. Yeah, exactly. So that is something so interesting about the color, what attracts you, but also when you go in, the usability, how easy it is and how I don't give up. Because like I said, the age and the women, we don't have time to go through so many questions, such difficult questions, we give up. So I really appreciate what that group shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joyce, for even bringing up the concept of investing in STEM for our young girls who can train their moms and their grandmothers on usability of the tech system. I'm going to ask our gentleman here. Yes, what has been your takeaway for today's session in regards to development of the app?
I think it's good. And to me, I think it has to be user-friendly, especially to the farmers. User-friendly, and it should be affordable in terms of packaging and dissemination of the materials. Yeah.
I'll direct that question to the developers. Is it at a charge?
Is there a charge? So I would say that, again, we are looking at a business model, because then we are working with digital advisory service providers who are typically private sector people. So what is the incentive in it for them to deploy this gender-sensitive digital agriculture solution? So I don't have the answer now, but I think that it is part of the research and to build a model that becomes a win-win situation, both for the service providers and the women smallholder farmers.
Thank you for that. For me, the other aspect, and I'm going to ask Gigi here, is about community. We have realized there is higher utilization of apps if you're going to find your friends or your family or your co-workers or people in the same industry. How are you putting that across as well?
There is definitely a social aspect of community. And in fact, I am just looking online at the survey results instantly. And user design, cultural and social norms are number one of our, challenges. So definitely there is a role that family, peer groups, and even what we call savings groups play in the use of these apps. So number one is the trust issue is actually strengthened when others that you trust are also using it. So as we mentioned, this is not only about the app, but it's an entire delivery channel that we are researching on. So an example of that, as Brigita was mentioning, is self-service enough, meaning you log in and you get your own results and you use it by yourself. Is a hybrid model and, good, wherein you're actually, working with an extension service or a chat bot, or would that be full extension services? And even if we don't have the results, in my mind and in our experience as Grameen, I definitely know there's gonna be two results. One is segmentation of users will actually inform a certain level of design depending on where you are. So the design has to meet people and your target audience. So on the peer group, okay, in India, for instance, we have the pradhans or the influencers in a group. And usually the delivery channel is such that you focus on training the pradhan so that that woman can influence the others. The second one is youth. Because youth actually, they know how to use their gadgets. They have better phones than their parents, they're more digital literate. It comes naturally to them. So including them in the use of the apps is certainly a good entry point as well.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to come to you and to this gentleman and to hear. There is an AGRF app. Do you guys have it? Have you downloaded it? Yes or no, and why?
I haven't been able to download it. It's been one frustration after the other. At some point, I thought I was having a user issue. So
who has the app on their phone right now? The AGRF app. So 2 people out of a room of 10.
yes, I struggled with it and then I gave up. I found alternative ways to get the information, which are, the screens all over, the programs, the emails. That's how I got the information that I was hoping to find in the app.
Have you given them feedback as a developer yourself? What kind of channels are you putting in place for this feedback?
I haven't given feedback because nobody asked, and rather it's not clear who do I tell. And I think it's important that as we are developing solutions like this, we must always incorporate feedback mechanisms that people are aware of, that work, and that are responsive.
Some farmers own smartphones, but others do not own smartphone. They can share. Those who have a smartphone, they can even share the information with the neighbors. And I think this can also react well and can bring positive change in our our activities of agriculture.
Thank you so much. I'm going to come to this lady here. Your name and the country that you come from?
My name is Hannele Lindqvist. I come from Peru.
From Peru. Maybe you can tell us how has been your experience in your country on using digital apps for food production?
Well, thank you for the question. We are using digital apps, for example, to try to find out what varieties farmers are using, to try to identify the varieties from those pictures, to get an idea of the impact that we have. I'm leading the breeding program at the International Potato Center, and it's very interesting for us to know how many farmers are cultivating our varieties. So we have that kind of apps under development, and I found this session very informative to how these kind of apps should be designed. What are their, there are many aspects that you need to take into consideration.
So the session of today is from the International Potato Center. Do we have them here? Yes, so the question is, what do roots and tuber crops contribute to agri-food systems transformation? So we have CGR, you can give them the floor.
Thank you. Welcome, roots and tuber crops. So it's gonna be an interesting one.
And great opportunity here to talk about the root and tuber crops. I'm sure most of you in the audience at some point today you have consumed potato or sweet potato or cassava as part of your diet. If not today, at least in the course of the week, you must have had that experience. So we think that these crops have great potential and they contribute a lot to our Africa's food system. And more importantly now, because of the issues around the climate stresses and droughts and unreliable seasons, we think that some of these crops are coming in handy to help farmers in terms of adaptation, in terms of helping with the crop diversification for, some systems such as maize and other ones that take quite long to mature. So today we want to look at that potential and how these crops are contributing, and their potential into the future as we continue to look at how our food systems in Africa can recover and even do well. So that is actually the spirit of today's discussion. We have example of those crops that we will mention today, like I already asked about potato, sweet potato, we have cassava. So not only these crops are good for climate and drought tolerance, we find that they are also nutritious. So when we are talking about food transformation, we are looking at food security, but not forgetting the nutrition angle of it. So with me today, I have some colleagues in the CGIAR who will provide some insights around those RTB crops. And our first speaker is Hanley. Dr. Hanley is our leader of potato and sweet potato breeding work at the International Potato Center. So although we are looking at the work at the International Potato Center, we'll also focus more broadly on the CGIAR because there are so many centers that are looking at the different crops that we call the root and tuber crops. So we might use, in some cases, examples of sweet potato and potato, but that's not limiting in terms of what the root and tuber crops are about. So, Dr. Hanley, welcome to the discussion. And I would like you to tell us about the kind of research innovations and evidence that exists to make these root and tuber crops important for climate resilience and adaptation for farmers, especially in Africa. Over to you.
Thank you, Joyce. So root and tuber crops are already important in African diets, and they are even getting more important. The consumption per capita is expected to increase because of population growth. And the role of root and tuber crops is going to be even bigger when climate changes, because these crops are very flexible and resilient. So some of the root and tuber crops, they thrive on marginal lands. For example, sweet potato is like this crop, and many other crops will not survive in that kind of conditions. In addition, potato and sweet potato are short cycle crops, so they can be harvested in under 100 days after they have been planted. So this gives a great advantage for these as a disaster relief crop. Like we have an example of in Mozambique after the cyclone Idai hit in 2019, and the sweet potato planting material was distributed to farmers, and it helped thousands of farmers to get back on their feet quickly and they had access to nutritious food. So this is an example that could be scaled up, definitely.
Excellent, thank you. But talk about the varieties. When we talk about drought resistant, do we have varieties, for example, that respond to this situation apart from the floods? What about the drought in Kenya, for example, and other areas? How are we responding as a CGIAR to address these climate-related stresses through the root and tuber crops?
Yes, we do have some varieties that have these kind of resilient traits, but the current productivity of root and tuber crops in farmers' fields is way below the true potential that these varieties have. So, the reasons for this are very complex. They depend also on the agricultural practices that are not maybe optimal, also the seed quality, but they depend on the variety. So, in a variety that it can be successful in farmers' fields, many traits have to be combined. And so with the climate change, the traits that are going to define the productivity a very important part of the productivity is the drought tolerance and heat tolerance and salinity tolerance. And also disease resistance needs to be there because there are new emerging diseases and pests. And the list does not end there, that we as breeders have to consider, because we also need to look at the consumer acceptance and what do the consumers want. So then we are talking about traits like nutritional content, also taste and texture, just to name a few. There are many. Also cooking time, that's a very important factor to consider. And so these survival traits and all these different traits need to come together in one variety so that it can be successful. And who do we go to? Who do we ask? What are the important traits? Is we need to take into account who are the people that cultivate these crops. And it's often women farmers who grow root and tuber crops. So we need to also consider them, especially the cooking time is something that the women farmers are very interested in.
Thank you for highlighting those aspects. So apart from the disease and other aspects that you highlight, and the gender angle as well, which I like very much, why are we not having adoption rates increasing in our farming systems in Africa for these crops? Or what is limiting that? It's there, but it's not at a level that we would want. So what are the challenges that come with these crops that we need to address?
So the challenges are, I already listed all these different traits, and then the breeding team needs to combine them in as fast as possible to this variety. And then how do we get these varieties to the farmers and so that they can generate impact is that we need a really good functioning seed system. And that is really the bottleneck. So in CGIAR, we are working through all these different aspects that are needed. So we have the market intelligence initiative where we look at the traits. We have the accelerated breeding initiative where we try to breed as fast, as efficient as possible. And then the seed equal that looks at the seed systems to get the varieties to the farmers and to the impact.
Thank you very much for those insights. So I might come back to you if we have time and after we engage the audience. But But before that, I want to come to our next speaker, who is Mandla Nkomo. Mandla is the Chief Growth Officer for the CGIAR's initiative on excellence in agronomy. And he's also a staff of one of our CGIAR centers called the IATA. So welcome, Mandla, and thank you for making time for us.
Thanks, Joyce.
So to scale up effectively and deliver this RTB innovation like we've heard from Hanley, we need evidence-based policies and the right investments to ensure that these crops become key to addressing the challenges of food and nutrition security for sustainability. How would you support this argument, especially drawing from your experience with excellence in agronomy and, of course, your experience with the private sector and other organizations where you've worked in?
Joyce, thank you so much. And I think those are very important questions. And I think, as my colleague has already said, we're in an exciting time in the sense that the investments that the CG has already made into the varieties is actually impressive. I've recently been onto the catalog, whether it's for potatoes, the so-called Irish potatoes, or for sweet potato. You can basically find a variety for many different contexts across the globe. What that tells us is that the constraint is no longer, do we have the genetics or the material? The constraint must lie somewhere else. And I think I want to share an example, Joyce, from the work that IITA and now Excellence in Agronomy has done in the cassava sector, for example. Because as you know, cassava is a very important crop, particularly in countries like Nigeria, where it is a staple. But we also know that, there's been a number of problems, not only farmers' access to planting material, and when they do get the planting material, is there all the supporting inputs that can allow them to get as close to optimal yields as possible? It's about practices. Once the farmer gets the planting material or the seed, how they look after it. In their particular agroecology, they might need certain practices which they don't need elsewhere. So what we've been able to do is that, building on top of the great work that our breeding teams had done on cassava seed systems through the Basics program, we then created a program that we called the Africa Cassava Agronomy Initiative. And what the Africa Cassava Agronomy Initiative did was to, first of all, engage the ecosystem for cassava production. And this starts with the farmers. So what problems are farmers having? What challenges are they expressing? And on the basis of that, we're able to identify up to 6 potential use cases that we could respond to with CGIAR science. And these included things like planting dates. These included things like appropriate fertilization approaches. These included things like intercropping, because cassava is a long crop. So what do you grow in between while the cassava is still getting ready? And a few of these. Now, because it was demand driven, we were then able to deploy our best-in-class agronomy science to try and really create actionable recommendations for farmers and test them in the field. Because often what the challenge is that you have a big country like Nigeria and there's one recommendation on how to grow cassava, which doesn't make sense, right? So our work was able to allow us to get down to giving what we call location-specific advisories to farmers. And then, because the CG doesn't work directly with farmers, we need to enable partners, right? The partners who have a vested interest in cassava being grown well, besides the farmers. So it's the aggregators, it's the financiers, it's the fertilizer companies, and all these actors. We brought them into the room and made sure that we were also responding to what they were trying to solve for. The end result is that, as I speak to you now, Joyce, we've created a platform called Akilimo. Akilimo is a combination of 2 Kiswahili words. Akili, which is being smart or wisdom, and Kilimo, which is agriculture. And this platform contains all these advisories. It's available in cartoon format. It's available in IVR content. There's even an app which were placed into the hands of those that interface with farmers. As I speak to you now, there's over 200 partners working with us on cassava here in Tanzania and also in Nigeria. More than that, these partners are reaching 350,000 farmers annually with cassava content. This is very exciting for us because it shows what is possible if we identify the demand or the pain points the farmers have, we assemble the science, we test it in the field, and we produce context and location-specific advisories for farmers. I think the traction can be had. So our experience is that the CG as a knowledge partner has a big role to play as a catalyst to the transformation of these farming systems, particularly for roots and tubers, for the reasons that my colleague has already explained. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much. So this content that you're developing and pushing it to farmers in a simplified, easy to understand, easy to take up format, is it just for cassava or you're also looking at the other crops? And is it just Akilimo in Kenya and Akilimo, I would imagine also Tanzania? Please elaborate a little bit more of that because people will be asking.
I'm glad you asked that. So like you said, you know, the roots and tubers space is quite wide. It does include cassava. And I think the success that I was sharing on cassava was to exemplify what scaling could look like and what the impact from that scaling could be. Now, if you look at the potato work, as Excellence in Agronomy, we are working on potatoes in two main locations in Nigeria and also in Rwanda. You'd know that in Rwanda, potatoes are one of the 6 major crops or priority crops in that country. And what we've done there, working with the national system, Joyce board, a good understanding of the soils in Rwanda, and then specific agronomy advice for the potatoes. And through the smart Nkunganire system, we are now working on embedding those advisories into that system so that when farmers receive input support from the government, they are also getting the advisory content for their area. For sweet potato, which is a crop that I know you love very much and it's dear to your heart, we've already started working, particularly in Kenya, to make sure that all the research and the work that you and your team have done over the last decade on sweet potato, particularly orange flesh sweet potato and the other varieties, does not sit in your servers or in your publications, but is actually now being embedded into content dissemination platforms like Sprout, which is run by AgriFin. So we have a mandate from the CG to take agronomy to scale, and particularly for RTBs. And we think the science is there, we think the partnerships are there, and we're prepared to do the work to then assemble these and really measure ourselves around how many farmers are receiving information, how many are adopting it, what is the impact that's coming out of that, and then to see if the promise that roots and tuber crops hold can be realized in reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'll stress you one more. Because I have this hypothesis about scaling. It's my own sometime, or not. But if we have the technologies, she mentioned about the technologies that exist. We have the capacities you're touching on through Excellence in Agronomy and other ways that we are building technical capacity of farmers to be able to become more productive. But then we need the right policies. We need investments, not from some of them from the donors, but unless our governments take it to their heart to invest in these crops, I think we can only really do something very, very small. So my question to you is, how do we inform policy through our work to make sure that we get governments take this up, put it in their budget, whether it's seed system, whatever they have to do, to really make sure that people are adopting and also to become our champions? What policies do we need or evidence?
Well, I think the last word that you said now for me is at the heart of it, right? So, effective policy, we all know, is based on quality information and evidence. And there are a few examples that are already coming up, Joyce, around the World Bank, for example, is starting to deploy funds around what they call, resilience building for food systems. Yeah. And what you are finding is that they're going to countries and saying, what are your priority crops? Yeah. Where do you want us to make the investment? Now, if a particular country does not have visible and sufficient evidence of the value that can be derived from the root and tuber crops, that's one. And two, there's not sufficient local examples of what success looks like, we are not going to make it onto that list. So the role that we need to play as the knowledge or the science community is to make sure that the evidence doesn't sit bottled up, but is made available. Because the policies that I think you're asking us to comment on is, these transformations require money. They require investments. If you are going to have cassava multiplication facilities, for example, using tissue culture and so forth, that requires an investment that no private company would ever make, right? It requires the national system to be able to make the investment. So I think our role, in my view, is to partner with the national system to make sure that they own the evidence for what success looks like, because then they would have more credibility in informing their governments to deal with issues of investment in seed, to deal with the issues of including root and tuber crops in subsidy programs for farmers. These are the policies that we need that I think will ultimately result in the scaling. But it all starts with the evidence, I agree.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting the importance of evidence, but also leading from behind and having this strategic and effective partnership where we have the NERS as the front runners and our voices for the work that we do. Thank you so much. So I might come back to you with a parting shot, but we need to go to our lovely, engaging audience. And I think that you can ask your question, but we would like to hear from you about the untapped potential of root and tuber crops for our farming systems or our food systems in Africa. So over to the audience, Wangari.
What has been your experience with roots and tuber crop?
So I'm thankful to CGIR. It's very informative, especially now that we hear you're focusing on sweet potato that is dear to Joyce, and also potato and cassava. The perception is that sweet potatoes is for people upcountry, people who live in the rural areas. But it's so nutritious that since we're hearing like now there are varieties that are resistant to drought and resistance to flooding, that is what we would need to replace the maize that has become political and has become scarce. But then this sweet potato, even when we try and acquire it, it's too expensive compared to bread. So I've heard about research, I've heard about the role of government and policy, but I've not heard about the role of private sector in picking it up and multiplying it or making it more commercial. Then the prices can come down and then we can have more nutritious food. So what do you think as researchers is the role of private sector in scaling it?
All those issues, we are aware about them, and we are saying now, okay, it's still more about increasing productivity, but it's other issues along the value chain that we need to look at. We need to look at, for example, the issue around the post-harvest management and storage issues. How do we help farmers with technologies that can help them be able to store these crops better, be able to handle them, but also involving the private sector now to come in and add value. For example, with the sweet potato, we have a lot of exciting work that's going on around with the private sector, processing the puree, for example, that's shelf stable. But then how does that then make it into the market, into the urban market, into the bakery industry, in the culinary industry? You find that people eat chapati, eat mandazi. We can have that as, with a bit of sweet potato puree. It's excellent, makes it more nutritious. So we think that we need to inject more effort, something more around the post-harvest, food safety, food security, but working on our informal market as the way that we also consume and access food. So that's what I can say for now. I'll stop here because we want to hear more comments.
Sorry, Joyce.
Two more, and then
Can
we're gonna
can I
close.
answer the gentleman?
Yeah.
He was asking
Yeah.
a specific question about where to get disease-free cassava cuttings. So here in Tanzania, you need to go to IITA, the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture. They've got a laboratory here in Tanzania that is producing clean planting material, and you'll be able to access that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but our dream is for you not to be going to ITA. Our dream is for you to access it near. And I think there are avenues in Tanzania with the seed producers who are certified, who can give you the clean planting materials nearer to where you are. So we can link you up, but our dream is that you don't have to ask us in future. So that's where we are heading to.
My name is Daniel. I'm a certified seed producer based in the Lake Zone, majorly on sweet potato for improved variety and OFSP. It's been a pleasure getting to hear from various initiatives that CGRA are doing. And my question actually to the panel today, we've had so much interventions in terms of the seed system that is acquiring clean, resilient seeds or cuttings for the root and tubers. But what is your input as the way you put so much efforts in establishing these the seed system? But now, for us, from what I've picked throughout these summits, is we should not just sell agriculture, but we sell the opportunities in agriculture. So as CGRA, your main focus, from what I've seen so far, is on the seed system. Now, what about the other value chain that is from, and she mentioned about the public sector, the private sector, what role are they doing in terms of commercialization of all these things? Now, if the effort by, let's say, the donors or the funders that actually fund the research aspect of it, what efforts are you doing to drum support from the same donors to help so that we have linkage from the seed system along the value chain, so that at the end of the day, we're talking about increased commercialization of the whole thing. Thank you. And just one more, to my friend from Kigoma, I come from Geita, and there are some initiatives that are being done about 5 months ago. There's been a tool that is being introduced called the Seed Tracker, where all registered farmers and producers can register, and anybody can access these cuttings from wherever they are. So maybe after the session, we can change contacts and then probably get to know more about the use of the Seed Tracker as well. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for your question. I wanted to highlight here, although we spoke a lot about the varieties, the breeding, and the seed systems work, but we also have delivery side of it, because we need to do a push and pull, like the adoption, the consumption has to happen, and then inform our work through like a feedback loop in terms of what varieties do they like, why do they like it, is it the color, is it the texture, is it the taste? So we have some work on the delivery, promoting consumption, but we try to say also as CGIR, where do we stop in the value chain And then the rest of it should be about strategic partnerships. Who is the right person to do what? So when it comes to the consumption and the promotion, I'll just highlight a few, but we have partnerships with some organizations such as the humanitarian sector. Right now, there's a big uptake from the World Food Program, for example, when they are doing their resilience programming. And we come in as well. So you find that sweet potato, for example, is doing very well in the fragile contexts that are drought prone. So we have this partnership where we get these partners to then promote the consumption, whether it's for school feeding program, whether it's for just local consumption, whether it's governments with their nutrition-based programs at national, subnational level. They do that promotion. But then we come in, we get the feedback on the ground, and we do that loop to sort of improve the innovations. But beyond the varieties, the innovations, we then have to do the delivery, and then that process continues. So that's how we work. But increasingly, it's about strategic partnership to be able to do that effectively and to scale up. Yeah.
And maybe to add, Joyce, if you go down the passage on the right there's a stand for the African Development Bank. In there, we are showcasing the work that our program called TAT, which is technologies for Africa's agricultural transformation. They've packaged what they call toolkits for a number of crops that show who else is providing inputs, what technologies are associated with that crop. Sweet potato is one of them. So you can actually go and see what else is being done to build these ecosystems, because it will require an ecosystem and other partners to do the transformation. Thanks.
My name is Gigi Gatti from Grameen Foundation. I've never seen a team that can make tubers and potatoes really exciting. I have to commend you guys. I mean, I have not lost my train of thought, just listening to you. My question is probably half answered by you, Joyce, in terms of partnerships. We work with farmer-producer organizations and cooperatives, and I'm just wondering, what is the best route to take for us to be able to work with you on securing the good, inputs for the farmer-producer cooperatives? Because one of the things that Grameen Foundation does is also work on the financing side, because that is always an issue, right? The issue is sometimes that the good inputs don't exist, or the good agriculture practices are not known, but rather you need money in order for you to be able to use these good inputs. And also you need money to be able to train them. So we are looking at funding, certain working capital, especially for women, to grow certain crops, including potatoes in India. And so the question is, how do we start working with you, identifying who are the sources? And then the second question is rather, I would say, ignorant, if I may put it that way, not being a scientist, but we are also looking at reducing the labor of women or burden of women in agriculture. And that is something that is very, very important in our work. And in my last trip to India, one of our projects helped fund potato diggers for smallholder women farmers. And I spoke to them. Eyes were really glowing by the fact that they had access to potato diggers. How is the CGIR looking at, these hybrid varieties? Can they reduce women's burden? What should we be thinking about in terms of that?
Thank you so much. Wow. So we'll take that one last question, and then we'll be able to end the session. Yeah. So if you could have your parting shots in 2 minutes.
I know. I'll take the one, but Mandla or Hanley, you can talk about the mechanization and the gender aspect of labor.
In a minute.
But financing is very important. Just now we had a discussion around how we can have sustainable and commercially viable seed system for these vegetatively propagated crops, because there's a challenge there. For the longest, this has been driven by public sector, institutional markets, giving handouts of vines. But now we are saying we want seed producers, seed merchants who can look at it as a business. So the issue of access to finance comes in quite well, and I'll be more than happy to take that discussion forward to see how we can do that. But I really appreciate that comment, and a very important aspect of the work that we are doing. But we need partnerships. Yeah, absolutely. So over to you on the mechanization. Haneli, you can talk about it.
Well, I can just briefly comment on the mechanization, because that is an important aspect that we are looking into, and especially to help the women farmers to be able to do that labor. So right now that's being done in bilateral projects mostly. So we can talk more about that because the time is running out.
Yeah, and then I think my parting shot is that I think we have made the case that root and tuber crops could really be transformative, both in terms of they are giving farmers options, climate resilience, food security, etc. A lot of work needs to be done. My view is that one of the ways we can accelerate that transformation is placing the power in the hands of women by ensuring that they are trained as the seed multipliers or the seed merchants in their communities. That's number one. Because if the technology lands and is accepted by women, I think its scalability is that much greater. And then I think the income that comes from access to improved varieties and so forth, a lot of it will still stay with the women. And I think the mechanization side is absolutely critical, right? Because sometimes farmers will tell you, why should I have a variety that gives me greater yield? That means more work. I've got other household chores and so forth. So we need to address that. And part of the work that we do within Excellence in Agronomy is look at mechanization and say scale appropriate and context appropriate mechanization solution that can reduce the amount of drudgery associated with agriculture. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes. So Joyce, as we close, there was an issue that was brought up by the gentleman there about opportunity. There are very many young people in this summit. We would like to know where the opportunity is. You don't have to explain, just list it. Just say, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. Come find us.
Opportunity for youth. We want them to get involved, but we want them to get involved along the value chain in what excites them and what appeals to them.
Give me some examples.
Examples could be what I said about the seed merchants selling seed.
Yes.
That's a good business. It's viable business. We have evidence. We want to scale that up.
Number two.
Number two is selling of roots for the urban markets.
Yes.
That's possible.
Yes.
And then number to have our scientists, and we have graduate fellowship programs.
Amazing.
We want youth and scientists for the future.
Nice.
So we are doing a lot of capacity development, and I think, is that good? You want
yes,
more?
Number 4. 2 more.
Okay, for the youth on
your friends help you.
value addition and commercialization, but I'll let them carry on. But yeah.
Do you need chefs? Do you need influencers such as Farmer on Fire?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you're right. For these crops to really become commonplace on the plates of many people, they need to be recognized as cool. Like I was saying right at the beginning, I mean, sweet potato chips from McCain. I mean, what more validation do you need? But if you can now have people doing the recipes and so forth, that's an opportunity. But I think there's also the export market. I mean, the UK right now and the Netherlands are a huge market for sweet potatoes, paying good money in off-season times. And in countries like Kenya and here in Tanzania, we've got the advantage of being able to place sweet potatoes in those markets when no one else can. So we must take it up.
Okay, one more.
I add one more. In Uganda, we have some youth who are involved in making silage. using the sweet
Oh,
potato
animal
vine.
feed.
Animal feeds.
Yes.
So it can be money making. It doesn't have to be
Amazing.
boring.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we have come to the close of our session. A hand of applause for our great panel
Thank
from
you, everybody.
CGIAR. Thank you. We'll meet here tomorrow.